Assalamu alaikum. In the previous lecture, we have seen how desertification is a serious problem that is now becoming like seen or observed in different parts of the world. But a fundamental question left behind is how can we know or how can we judge if a land is exposed to desertification, or let's put it in this way, if a land is desertified. In today's lecture, we would learn about these things, which are basically called the indicators, and we would see some example how to use them. Through the lecture, you would be learning about the concept of desertification indicators. You would also know why the indicators are needed, and we will get into the dilemma between the scientists and the policymakers when it comes to the indicators. Then we're gonna see some of the basic criteria for developing the indicators. And at the end of the lecture, I would give you an example of a common approach or a framework that is used as an indicator for desertification. Now, what comes to your mind when somebody tell you indicators? What does indicators mean to you? And how indicator is useful to you? Well, if you look at the definition of indicators, you would find that indicator is a thing that can indicate the state or the level of something. In a simple way, indicators can tell us about the current situation, the trend, and it can help us to make decisions in the future. Now, do you think that indicators and data are the same? Well, no. Indicators are basically use the data to generate information or to extract useful information that would tell you about the situation or the trend, whether you have an increase or a decrease or no change about something, which later on can help you to make decisions to shape up the future. Now, what are the indicators for desertification? Well, the indicators for desertification are basically parameters that can be collected, and these parameters would provide us with information about the situation or the trend, about land degradation in drylands due to the climatic and human activities. In a simple way, we can say that the indicators can later on help us to come up with a conclusion like this. It will tell us whether, for example, the land is degraded or not degraded, or what is exactly happening with this land over time. So to get indicators or to get this conclusion, we need some parameters, some indicators that tell us what is exactly happening on this land when it comes to land degradation. Now, why do you think that these indicators are really needed? Why do we need them? If you think about it, you can find that the indicators can help us to break down the complexity of desertification. In the previous lecture, we have seen that there are different causes of desertification, and sometimes it is even very difficult to distinguish the main cause of the problem. So when you use indicators, the indicators would break the complexity down, and then it can tell you what is exactly happening, whether your land is degrading or not degrading, whether it is under high sensitivity of desertification or not. And by doing so, we can say that from the indicators, we can get an early warning about the problem. Now, let's imagine that you actually want to know the status of something. Then if you have indicators, then it can tell you that, hey guys, you might have a problem in this land, and your land might be susceptible to this issue based on the current situation that is happening. And this is actually for sure later on would save you a lot of money, and it can help you to prevent, for example, making the situation worse. Another very important thing about the indicators that basically, as we look at the example, how can we judge if a land is desertified or not? Well, the indicators can help us to know that. And by doing so, then you would be able actually to tell the decision makers to make decisions or policy, or to tell the policymakers that the about the situation of that particular land. Another thing that it can basically help you to analyze the effectiveness of the solutions. Now, if you know that you have a problem in a particular land, now you would be proposing some of the solution to this problem. How do you know whether your solution is working or not? The indicators will tell you that. It will tell you, well, if you do this, then you are making the situation better, or you're not making any change, or you're making the situation worse. So this is actually what the indicators provide. At the end of the day, you are, as a scientist, would present your data and you communicate it with decision makers. And the decision makers are the one who would make the crucial decisions. So by telling them that if you don't stop this kind of practice, then you will make the situation worse, and this is the best solution that you can do. Therefore, the policymakers can take up that decisions. So you make life easy. Now, there's something really very funny here about the scientists and the policymakers. Well, as a scientist, when they think about a problem, they always try to find a lot of data. They always thinking about the validity and the accuracy of the situation. And because of that, they might propose much complex and difficult indicators to analyze the problem. Now, the question is, does this work in like for the decision makers or not? Well, if you are going to meet a minister, let's say the Minister of Environment, and you want to tell him that we have desertification in this particular land, then he is expecting from you to do actually a study to analyze the situation, and you might do the project in 3 years. But at the end of the day, he's expecting from you to summarize everything in very simple way, to tell him the cream of your study in a very short time. So the policymakers are actually always favoring to have clear indicators that are actually simple, and they can help them to make quick decisions about the problem. I can give you this illustration, which shows actually the dilemma between scientists and the policymakers. You're making a study of 3 years, and then your boss would ask you to summarize everything into 6 bullet points PowerPoint presentation. Wow, how do you do that? You have to practice. Now, if you want to set indicators for desertification, then what are the criteria to do that? Well, basically, one of the most important things regarding the criteria is that your indicators must be like useful for the users, and must actually be representative and simple to interpret and compare. In a nutshell, like your indicator should tell you exactly what is happening about that particular land. And from the indicators, you should easily find this conclusion. The other thing that it should be analytical soundness. It means it should be like scientifically well found. It means that let's say that if you use this tool or this indicator, then you can use it in different parts of the world, and it is actually consistent. It can work, and it's actually scientific way, not just like randomly done. And the other criteria, it has to be measurable. It means that it is basically based on data, and the data that you collect are readily available. It is actually readily available for use, and from these data you can tell the situation. Now, there are actually different approaches or frameworks that can be used as indicators for desertification, and some of the famous ones like TBSIR, which describe driver pressure state impact response, and you have rangeland health, functions and ecosystem service, soil quality, soil change, hydrology and water balance, and so on and so on. Every one of these indicators, or every one of these approaches, uses different indicators and actually focus on something. For example, I'll give you the first one, the rangeland health. For example, the rangeland health is basically used to assess the health of rangeland using biological and physical indicators. And actually, if you look at this one, it actually looks like this. So the rangeland health approach was actually developed by the National Research Council in USA in 1994. And it basically combines quantitative and qualitative data that can tell you about the status of the rangeland. And it uses 17 indicators. Now, I want you to differentiate between approach and indicators. The name of the approach is rangeland health. And within this approach, it uses actually 17 indicators, 17 مؤشر, that tells you or can help you to evaluate whether this rangeland is actually undergoing desertification or not. And you can look at this. The indicators in these are actually divided into 3 different parts. So it uses the soil, it collects data about the soil, about the hydraulic function, hydrologic function, and about the biological functions of the soil. So under each one of these status, it actually have different indicators. For example, when it comes to the stability, when it actually look at the stability of the soil, it evaluates, for example, the rill, the water flow patterns, the ground, whether it's bare or vegetative, and so on. Because all of these indicators, it will actually tells you whether your soil is stable or not. Then you have other things related to the hydraulic function regarding the water. Then it looks at, again, other indicators, and then about the biological function of the soil, and so on and so on and so on. After doing so, for example, if you take the example of water flow pattern, then under water flow pattern, you will have a table like this. So this table, it gives you a rate depending on the situation. So you are looking for water flow pattern, for example, in that particular land. And then based on the observation that you make and the data that you collect, you can rate it. You can rate the condition, give the status of the condition, whether it's extreme to total, moderate to extreme, or none to slight. And then it has here description about the situation that you are actually seeing in the field. At the end of the day, your outcome will be a map like this. After collecting all of these data and evaluating the situation, you will present a map like this. If you look at the first map, then it's basically a map that shows the different types of, let's say, of the landscape which you have. So this is the border of your land of assessment, and then it classified the land into 4 different or 3 different like landscapes. Then if you look at the second map, then it basically integrates two things. It actually integrates the map, the soil map, it shows the landscape, and also it shows the rating, the situation. You remember this one? Extreme to total, moderate to extreme, moderate, slight to moderate. It shows here the colors and it shows the status of these land. So from the map, you can know, for example, the higher portion of this land is actually none to slight. هذا المنطقة in this area, you don't have a problem. You don't have to focus on it. Whereas you can see, for example, the areas here, or the area here is actually moderate to extreme. And this area is slight to moderate. So you know where to prioritize your efforts. Where do you start to spend the time to solve the issue? And by doing this, you can actually make your decision and save your money. Did you get the idea now? The indicators at the end of the day tells you about the situation, like this one, a situation of the land. You would know which part of the land is more susceptible to the problem, or you would know actually the status of that land, whether it's degraded, not degraded, what is actually happening there. And by doing so, by knowing this information, you can then make your decisions where to put your energy, where to put your resources, what kind of things you would do to solve the problem. And then you can monitor the situation and you collect data from, you look at the indicators and you collect data and you analyze the situation, and you would see, you evaluate whether your action is making a progress, has an effect or no effect. So these are some of the references for this part. And actually, I think this is enough for this lecture. And try to watch the video several times, try to understand the lecture, and try to read from this book, chapter 5, which actually I put in the model. And then we will meet in the discussion session to see how can we make things clearer to you. So till that time, take care and bye.